Science does not begin by attacking God. It begins with a smaller and more dangerous act. It asks for the mechanism. It asks what can be tested, what can be measured, what prediction would fail if the idea were wrong. That sounds harmless at first. A telescope points at Jupiter. A prism splits white light. A detector clicks when a particle passes through. A fossil is lifted from stone. A spectrum shows hydrogen in a star. Nothing in these actions looks like an argument against religion. They are just instruments, sensors, lenses, clocks, wires, glass, and mathematics. But once the machine is turned on, it does not stop at the edge of anyone's comfort. That was the conflict Richard Feynman understood, not the cheap version, not the shouting match where science says one word and religion says another. The real conflict is deeper and colder. It is not between intelligence and stupidity. It is not between morality and immorality. It is not even, at first, between belief and disbelief. It is between two operating systems for handling uncertainty. One system treats uncertainty as a defect to be repaired. The other treats uncertainty as the power supply. You think the conflict is a war over one sentence, God exists or God does not exist. Feynman's view was quieter than that, and more dangerous to simple arguments. He did not think science could disprove God. He said the opposite, that this was impossible. No voltmeter for divinity, no telescope for every possible form of meaning. No particle accelerator that can collide two beams and return a final reading that says zero. A scientific instrument does not measure everything. It measures a defined interaction under defined conditions. But this does not make the conflict disappear. It makes it sharper. Because science does something more subtle than disproving God. It changes the pressure inside the mind. It changes the standard by which a claim is allowed to pass. It takes statements that once felt absolute and places them on a scale of probability, evidence, uncertainty, and revision. The statement is no longer protected by force, tradition, inheritance, or emotional gravity. It has to stand in the open, exposed to measurement. That exposure is the conflict. A child raised inside a religious structure receives a set of answers before he has the instruments to test them. The universe was made for a purpose. Human beings have a central role. Prayer is heard. Moral law comes from a divine source. Death is not final. The world is not just matter moving through fields. These are not presented as temporary models. They are presented as foundations. They are load-bearing beams in the building of the mind. Then the child learns science. Not science as a list of facts. That is not the dangerous part. The dangerous part is the method. He learns that every claim about the world must be calibrated. Some things are measured with high confidence. Some things are plausible. Some things are unsupported. Some things are not even shaped in a way that permits a test. He learns that the Earth is not the central platform of creation. It is a moving body with a radius of about 6,371 kilometers, orbiting an ordinary star at roughly 30 kilometers per second. He learns that the Sun is one star among hundreds of billions in the Milky Way. He learns that the Milky Way is one galaxy among hundreds of billions, perhaps trillions, in the observable universe. The scale expands until the old human-centered picture begins to lose mechanical stability. Not because science has disproved meaning, because it has changed the dimensions of the room. If a religion says the Earth is fixed at the center, astronomy can answer, the Earth moves. If a religion says species were separately assembled in their present form, biology can answer. Life branches by descent, mutation, selection, and time. If a religion says a disease is caused by a curse, medicine can test infection, tissue damage, immune response, and molecular failure. In these cases, science is not attacking religion as religion. It is attacking a claim about what happens in the physical world. This is the first layer. Science conflicts with religion, when religion makes mechanical claims about nature. A mechanical claim is a statement that can collide with measurement. The Earth is still, the planets move in circles, because heaven is perfect. Lightning is thrown by divine anger. The age of the world is a few thousand years. Human beings are biologically separate from animals. These claims enter the same arena as astronomy, geology, physics, and genetics. Once they enter that arena, they do not get special shielding. They are not sacred as mechanisms. They are testable descriptions of events, and when testable descriptions fail, they fail. This is why the history of science often looks like a series of retreats by religious metaphysics, not because every religious person is foolish, not because every scientist is wise, because when a metaphysical claim is attached to a physical mechanism, the physical mechanism can be measured. The telescope does not care about doctrine. The fossil layer does not care about authority. The spectroscope does not care about the emotional cost of a result. That is the brutal neutrality of the instrument. But here is where Feynman's view becomes more careful than most people realize. He drew a line. And that line is not where most people draw it. He separated religion into three distinct regions, not as an act of charity toward religion, but as an act of precision, because science does not collide with each region in the same way. The first region is metaphysical, what exists, where the universe came from, what God is, whether prayer is heard, whether the human soul survives death. The second is ethical, how one should live, how one should treat another person, what duties human beings carry toward one another. The third is inspirational, the emotional strength, courage, and comfort that religious life can provide. These regions are not the same thing. The collision with science is not the same in each one. The metaphysical region takes the hardest impact, not because science has disproved every metaphysical claim, it has not. Not because every scientist is an atheist, that is false. Feynman explicitly allowed that some scientists believe in both science and God in a consistent way. The collision occurs because science changes the meaning of belief itself. It moves statements away from absolute certainty and places them on a scale of probability. The sentence, "I know," becomes, "How strongly is this supported by evidence?" That small movement changes everything. The ethical region does not collapse so easily. A person can stop believing that a specific miracle happened and still believe it is wrong to betray a friend. A person can doubt the divinity of a figure and still hold to the command to treat another human being with mercy. A person can accept that Earth is a planet, humans are animals, and stars are nuclear furnaces, and still feel the weight of honesty, loyalty, restraint, and compassion. Science can tell you what will happen if you lie, if you steal, if you build a weapon, if you poison a river, if you vaccinate a population, if you release carbon dioxide into an atmosphere. It can calculate consequences. It can measure outcomes, it can model damage, but it cannot by measurement alone tell you what you should value. There is no particle named ought, there is no unit of moral permission. A pressure vessel is not defective because it cannot measure voltage. A telescope is not defective because it cannot weigh a stone. A scientific method is not defective because it cannot derive an ultimate moral command from a data table. Science answers a specific type of question. If I do this, what will happen? That is its territory. The other half of the human question remains, do I want that to happen? What price is too high? What must never be treated as a tool? Feynman saw this with unusual clarity. The inspirational region is harder. Here the problem becomes human, not merely logical. If a person's courage comes from feeling aligned with the will of God, then doubt about God can weaken the source of that courage. If a person's moral strength comes from feeling watched, loved, commanded, or forgiven by a divine presence, then uncertainty is not just an intellectual adjustment, it is a structural change in the inner life. Science can say this claim is uncertain, but it does not automatically provide the comfort that certainty once gave. It can reveal the age of the stars, the kinship of life, the structure of atoms, and the vast indifference of cosmic scale. It can show that a human being is made of matter, but it cannot by itself tell that human being how to bear grief. It can explain what happens when the heart stops. It cannot replace every song sung beside a grave. But in real life, these three regions are not neatly separated. Religion often binds morality to metaphysics. The moral code is not just a rule, it is the will of God. The comfort is not just emotional support, it is contact with the structure of the universe. The ritual is not just social behavior, it is a bridge to something ultimate. Once doubt enters the metaphysical layer, the emotional and moral layers may begin to shake, not because they logically must fall, but because they were bolted to the same frame. This is the engineering problem of belief. If the moral beam is welded to the metaphysical beam, and the metaphysical beam is placed under scientific stress, the whole structure vibrates. Some people reinforce it, some separate the beams, some rebuild the entire structure. Some abandon it, some keep the moral circuit running while removing the old power source. Some keep the power source, but accept that every switch and wire must be redesigned. The real conflict is not a single explosion. It is a load redistribution. Now think about the scientific mind Feynman described. It does not merely hold different facts, it holds facts differently. A person may say, I believe this is true. A scientist, when speaking carefully, says something colder. The evidence gives this claim a high probability. This claim has survived these tests. This claim is consistent with these measurements. This claim may fail under conditions we have not yet examined. The statement is never welded shut. It remains adjustable. That adjustability is not weakness, it is the mechanism of progress. A bridge designed with no allowance for stress will crack. A circuit with no tolerance will burn. A theory with no room for doubt will become a doctrine. Science survives because its statements are built to be attacked. Every law is a component exposed to load. Every equation must carry prediction. Every model must face the possibility of failure. Even the best theories are not sacred. Newton's mechanics worked with extraordinary power, then broke at high speed and strong gravity. Einstein did not erase Newton. He showed the range in which Newton's machine functioned and the conditions under which it failed. Quantum mechanics did not make the older world imaginary. It revealed machinery beneath it. This is why doubt is not the enemy of science. Doubt is the bearing surface. Religion, at least in its traditional form, often asks for a different internal posture: trust, faith, surrender, confidence in truths not held merely as probabilities. These are not minor psychological differences. They are different control systems. In science, doubt is feedback. In many forms of religion, doubt is noise to be overcome, or a trial to be endured, or a wound to be healed. That does not mean every religious tradition treats doubt the same way. Many have deep traditions of argument, interpretation, and uncertainty. But Feynman was pointing at the pressure that appears when absolute metaphysical certainty meets a method that has trained the mind to distrust absolute certainty. That was the real conflict. Not science shouting that God is impossible. Not religion shouting that physics is evil. The conflict is between two mental postures, one that survives by keeping the door to uncertainty open, and one that often survives by closing it around sacred claims. A scientist may believe in God. Feynman allowed that possibility. The logical contradiction is not automatic, but the scientist who remains honest with the scientific method cannot believe in the same sealed way. The belief becomes calibrated, it carries doubt, it becomes less like a steel block and more like a probability distribution. That may still be belief, but it is not the same machine. The universe of science is not small enough to keep human beings at the center. It does not appear arranged like a theater with Earth as the stage and human moral drama as the only plot. The cosmos is old, vast, violent, and mostly indifferent to human presence. Stars formed before Earth existed. Galaxies collided before life began. Most of space cannot support human breath for even 1 minute. The atoms in your body were processed in stars that did not know they were building eyes, hands, grief, memory, or prayer. The scale does not disprove God, but it does damage certain pictures of God. It makes some inherited images feel mechanically inadequate, not impossible, not disproven in every form, inadequate as a model of the observed system. If someone says the entire universe was arranged mainly around the moral testing of one species on one planet, science cannot stamp the claim with mathematical impossibility, but astronomy changes the pressure around that claim. Biology changes it, geology changes it, evolution changes it. The claim is no longer resting in a small cosmos. It is suspended inside deep time, deep space, and non-human machinery. The human mind can survive that, but it cannot remain unchanged. There is another layer, and it is often missed. Science does not produce certainty, but it also does not produce emptiness. The loss of an old answer does not mean the world becomes flat. Feynman did not treat uncertainty as despair. He treated it as access. If the universe is not fully known, then it remains open to investigation. If answers are not handed down fully formed, then the act of finding out has value. The unknown is not a wall, it is a frontier. The world does not become less deep when thunder stops being a voice. It becomes charged air, electric field gradients, rapid expansion, acoustic shock, and light moving faster than sound. The rainbow does not become less real when the prism explains it. It becomes wavelengths, angles, droplets, and the geometry of light. The body does not become worthless when it is understood as atoms. It becomes carbon chemistry, neural signaling, thermodynamics, memory storage, and fragile order resisting entropy for a short time. Science removes certain kinds of meaning. It also reveals certain kinds of structure. There is a temptation on both sides to make the argument simpler than it is. Some defenders of religion say science is arrogant, cold, and spiritually empty. But this ignores the humility built into science at its best, the willingness to admit ignorance, to revise belief, to stand before reality without forcing it to flatter us. Some defenders of science say religion is nothing but superstition, but this ignores the fact that religion has carried moral discipline, community, art, courage, and consolation for enormous parts of human history. Feynman's view cuts against both forms of laziness. He would not let science pretend to answer moral value by measurement alone. He would not let religion protect physical claims from evidence. He would not let believers say there is no conflict when metaphysical certainty collides with advancing knowledge, and he would not let atheists claim that science has mathematically disproved God. His position was sharper because it was narrower. This is where Feynman's view separates itself from both religious certainty and crude atheistic certainty. He distrusted final answers too easily obtained. He was not interested in replacing one unquestionable doctrine with another. A scientific worldview that says we have solved everything would betray the very engine that created science. The scientist does not stand at the end of knowledge. He stands inside a machine that only moves because ignorance is admitted. There is dignity in that, not comfort in the ordinary sense. Not the comfort of being told that everything is arranged for you, a harder kind of dignity, the dignity of not pretending to know what you do not know, the dignity of allowing the universe to be larger than your inherited picture, the dignity of saying that a claim must face reality even if the claim is old, loved, and socially protected. Science asks for the humility of the intellect. Religion, at its best, asks for the humility of the spirit. The tragedy begins when the intellect is forced to pretend certainty, or when the spirit is told that doubt is a sin. Feynman's deepest challenge was not aimed only at religion. It was aimed at any system that cannot tolerate doubt. Political ideology, scientific fashion, social dogma, intellectual pride, institutional authority, personal identity, any structure that says the answer is already known and cannot be tested is moving away from the scientific spirit. The danger is not belief alone. The danger is belief with no feedback loop. A machine with no feedback loop cannot correct itself. It can only continue. A person who accepts this view cannot honestly say, I know with absolute certainty what happens after death. He cannot honestly say the universe was built for my species unless he is willing to face the evidence that makes that claim difficult. He cannot honestly use God as a plug for every gap in explanation. The gap may close. The unknown may become known. Lightning becomes electrical discharge. Disease becomes pathogen. Immune failure, mutation, or cellular breakdown. Planetary motion becomes gravity and inertia. The rainbow becomes refraction and dispersion. The stars become plasma under gravitational compression and nuclear fusion. Each explanation removes a hiding place, but it also adds machinery. The real conflict, then, is not whether God can be put into an equation and cancelled out. That is too crude. The real conflict is what happens when a mind trained on certainty is rewired by a method that survives through uncertainty. It is what happens when sacred explanations enter the range of instruments. It is what happens when moral feeling remains strong, but its old metaphysical supports begin to vibrate. It is what happens when a human being tries to stand between two inheritances, the hunger for meaning and the discipline of doubt. One inheritance says, hold fast. The other says, test the grip. You can see why the conflict does not end. Science keeps moving. Every generation pushes instruments into places. Earlier generations protected with story. The microscope enters the cell. The telescope enters deep time. The accelerator enters matter. The genome enters ancestry. The brain scanner enters thought. None of these machines knows what it is disturbing. They simply return readings. Then the mind has to decide what to do with them, and that decision is not purely scientific. It is human. It involves courage, loss, loyalty, fear, and honesty. The data do not remove the burden of interpretation. They sharpen it. They prevent certain escapes. They make some answers harder to keep. They make some silences more honest. Science does not logically forbid God. It forbids pretending that a claim about the world is protected from the world. It forbids certainty where the mechanism is unknown. It forbids using mystery as a locked door. It forbids treating doubt as contamination. And once a person has truly absorbed that discipline, even belief changes its texture. It becomes less like possession and more like risk. The conflict between science and religion is not a war between facts and comfort. It is the strain that appears when the human need for certainty meets a universe that only answers under interrogation. The instrument is still running.